Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the webinar of Expansion to Japan. Things to consider today. My name is Takaho Iwasaki, a speaker of today's webinar. Before I start this, I want you to know that today's class is not for the class to learn the technical skills, logistic or marketing details in Japan for your manufacturing products. What I'm going to present today is a basic knowledge and overview of Japanese market and some updates and trends from Japanese consumers. You might already know some of them, or everything might sound very new to you. However, this is very important information to start thinking about entering Japan, Japanese market, and I found a lot of the important informations when I'm researching about this the trends. I hope you enjoy this webinar and it will help you to understand the Japanese market and to develop your long-term strategy. Japan. While it is a very attractive market, especially for Hawaii business, because we have a lot of Japanese people and the Japanese people love Hawaii and we have many Japanese tourists coming in, but it is still challenging. Why is the Japanese market is so difficult? What makes the Japanese market complicated and different from other markets like US? Here's a breakdown of factors that make Japanese market difficult. The first challenge is the language barrier. The average English-speaking score in Japan ranks the worst among other Asian countries. One of the reasons why Japanese people can't speak English is that they don't need to speak English in Japan. The environment makes it challenging for the English speakers to do research about the Japanese market. When you do business in market, one of the critical steps is research. But Japan, you can barely get English resources since Japanese people don't use or don't need English materials from a business standpoint. Also, you have to understand Japanese is very difficult, and then but you still have to use it to communicate with your customers and the vendors because they can't speak English. Especially for the business language, business Japanese. Japanese is very difficult and complicated because of the language structure. It's very different from English. So you have to not only be able to understand, but also have to be a good communicator to succeed in Japanese market. Of course, some good Japanese English-speaking business people exist in Japan, and you can hire or ask to be your partner, but it is extremely difficult to find them because of the reasons that I mentioned before. The second challenge is a strong culture. Japanese culture is unique and different from other countries since the culture was established in isolated island almost for 1800 years, and it's changed a lot every year. Even the business model is different from Western culture. We never call our colleagues by the first names. At the business meeting, there is a rule for order of seating. When you write a letter, especially the business letter to your clients, there are the seasonal words to start letters and a lot of other rules. Of course, you don't have to understand and follow all of the rules because many Japanese don't even know those everything. But you have to know and understand the culture to develop your good selling product or optimizing your marketing in the Japanese market, because it is highly connected to the Japanese consumer behavior. Also, by growing up this strong culture, many Japanese people don't know about the outside of Japan or never experienced outside of Japan. So people in Japan are not necessarily familiar with international standards. The third challenge is our collectivist society that doesn't favor outsiders. This characteristic is extreme at the business level. Local people don't like outside businesses or stores. Japanese companies are very skeptical of foreign competitors. Even inside the office, if you're not working in a company right after graduating college, you're called not proper and have a difficulty becoming part of it. So as a non-Japanese business, you have an extra barrier to overcome to join the fair competition in Japanese market. Also, you have to understand this concept as a culture to understand consumer behavior and communicate with them. There's a lot of pressure to comfort in Japan, so people rarely say how they truly feel or think. This causes many social problems and people stress and prevent Japan from becoming international. From my experience, this is very hard for people to understand if you're grown up in a Western culture, but you have to remember this when you do the business in Japan. The fourth challenge is the high demanding customers. I think this is a big part of why Japan is a difficult market. When I say high demanding customers, the customers are not like complaining a lot or writing about review to give you a hard time. Japanese have incredibly high expectations for the product and the services, especially in the Japanese market. I'm sure that some of the audiences have ever visited or lived in Japan, but did you find how those products in Japan is very high quality, but still very cheap? That's our standard. And the Japanese customers are very used to this high quality product with reasonable prices. Tasty or non-defective product, good hospitality is a minimum requirement for the product and the service to be successful in Japan. It is almost impossible to find a low quality product in Japan. When you enter the Japanese market, your product has to compete with those high quality and reasonable products. So product market fit is also the price positioning is crucial to enter the Japanese market. The fifth challenge is the highly competitive Japanese market. As I mentioned in the previous challenge, your competitors are those companies that have the technology and the knowledge to make a good fit product in Japan with a scale of economy to sell them at a reasonable price. And we have many of them, including non-Japanese competitors from other countries. You have to convince consumers to choose your product and service over those strong competitors' product. And those competitors are not only small, medium-sized businesses like you do have. Most of them are mega Japanese companies that you might even know their brands, like Shiseido, Nissin, which makes a cup noodle, and Santry. They can sell good product at the low prices, but they also have supply chains, distribution power, sales channels, or other competitive advantages. In some industry, it is even harder for Japanese small, medium-sized business to survive because the Japanese market is more of an oligopoly controlled by the major players than in the US. You have to compete with them if you enter the Japanese market. And often, just being a Hawaii brand is not enough to convince Japanese consumer to choose your product over them. I highly recommend you do a competitive analysis when you're entering the Japanese market. The last and the most challenging is regulation. There are many regulations in some industries like food, alcohol, and the cosmetic industry. It is tough for non-Japanese companies to adhere to them because they are very limited in the English version. Also, those regulations have a long history as the Japanese market has been changed. And the major Japanese companies highly involved with establishing those regulations to protect their business. To overcome this challenge, I highly recommend finding local partners who have experiences and knowledge for international exporting and importing, especially for food, cosmetic, and alcohol manufacturers, which is have a very strict regulation to enter Japanese market. Or at least hire somebody who can research about the market and industry. Okay, I talked about all of the challenging in the previous slides, but then I'm not here to discourage you from entering Japan. In fact, Japan is a very, very attractive market to a lot of businesses, and a lot of manufacturers have been very successful and become global by entering the Japanese market. So I'd like to introduce the opportunities in the Japanese market. First, it is a huge market. Japan is the third largest nominal GDP country, and it is still the fourth largest GDP by purchasing power parity. While our population has been decreasing, it is still a big market with a high population with relatively wealthy consumers. Once you acquire the market, it is easy to boost your scale compared to other markets such as Korea, Southeast Asia, or other European countries. And there are not many markets like this. In terms of the e-commerce industry, Japan is the fourth largest market. This actually surprised me because adopting new technology like EC is very difficult in Japan. I know many companies have a hard time to apply the e-commerce site for their business, and then even the customer standpoint, many seniors, which are significant consumers in Japan, are still not used to do the online shopping. But I think the Japanese scale of economy and the purchasing power fill those gaps and the lack of the speed of technology adoption. COVID-19 definitely accelerated technology to adapt those EC technology from both sides, business standpoint and consumer standpoint. So there's definitely an opportunity that exists there. Also, Japanese consumers are very loyal customers. Once they like your product, they keep buying them, respect your business, and they follow the purchasing terms. Also, if you're doing the B2B business to Japanese companies, most of your customers are very polite or well-behaved, such as following the contract, paying on time, listening to you. There are, of course, some exceptions for this, but I would say most of Japanese members or the customers are very reliable and responsible if you communicate with them in the right way. Japan is a very good stepping stool to expand your business globally. Many international companies have become globally successful by entering Japan at the pretty early stage of expansion. Sorry. So such as Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Starbucks, IKEA, Danone. Recently, tech companies such as Google, Amazon, Zoom have successfully entered the Japanese market, and it accounts for the large part of their global sales. It has been changed as China and India has been dramatically growing, but still Japan is a go-to key for you to be successful in the Asian market, considering how stable our economy and the society is. The last and the most important factor for the opportunity in Japanese market for only you is that you have a strong Hawaii brand power, which is very strong, very high in the Japanese consumers. Again, the Japanese market is not easy to be successful just because you're from Hawaii. The evaluation is very hard to pass once your products are available in Japanese market, because as I said, Japanese consumers' expectations are very high. And being Hawaii brand is not good enough to compete in the Japanese market. However, Hawaii's brand recognition is very high and powerful, considering how many Japanese people come to Hawaii, know Hawaii, and dream about the coming to Hawaii. If you use it very wisely, it is a factor that can work in your favor to win Japanese market. Other than challenges and opportunities in the Japanese market, I'd like to introduce a couple of the factors that you should consider when entering the Japanese market. The average household net adjusted disposal income per capita in Japan is $29,798 a year, which is lower than the OECD average, the net income. The average household net adjusted disposal income per capita in the United States is $45,284 a year. So so you can tell how we have to be careful when we decide what to buy. This relatively low average income is coming from our low inflation rate. While the US has maintained about like 1 to 2% inflation rate for a decade, Japanese inflation rate was 0.48% in 2019. This is a low number compared to other major countries. With low inflation, corporate sales are barely growing, business performance is sluggish, and the employee salary is difficult to rise, which impacts the Japanese economy. The Bank of Japan targets 2% as a healthy inflation, but it has been less than 1% since we hit 2.76% in 2014, when the Bank of Japan conducted a bold monetary easing in 2013. This is why Japanese people prefer to domestic product and be picky about imported premium products from outside Japan. Under this deflation, everything is cheap, but it is still Japanese quality. When they pay premium imported goods in Japan, they have to be convinced to pay the premium with their low income. It is high aging and low birth rate country. While the population rate of over 65 years old is 28%, which is the highest of all nations. The birth rate per 1,000 is only 7, which is the second lowest according to the World Bank. This means most Japanese consumers are or will be over 65 years old, so we can expect them to spend more money on health or life after retirement, which is hobby, travel, and other recreational activities. There is no room for kids business in Japan because the ratio of kids population is very low. The answer is no. Since kids are very few compared to the family members, spending per kids from parents and grandparents will be very high and concentrated. So kids business should be something that you should consider about the entering Japanese market. Okay, so these were the basic knowledge and then some overview of Japanese market. I'd like to introduce a couple of case studies of how non-Japanese companies enter Japanese market successfully. Excuse me. The first case is Godiva. One of the most successful factors that they did is understanding our gifting culture very well. They did an excellent job of making beautiful package, changing every season, which Japanese people think essential. Their first distributor and partner was Takaho, which is a famous importer who has an experience to find a good product market fit in the Japanese market and localize it to the market. They even found a different partner for selling their product at the department store because selling the product at the department store has a different strategy. They created a very specialized strategy for the Japanese market. While many Japanese confection companies sold chocolate for $1 or $2, they priced their box of chocolate at $20. They developed the product to match their price positioning and expanded their product portfolios based on the Japanese consumers' behavior and seasonality trends, such as creating different package for every 4 seasons, and also the specialized package for the Valentine's Days. In Japanese culture, Valentine's Day is for the women to confess their love to the man by giving the chocolate. Also, at the Valentine's Day, women give a small chocolate to friends for a friendship. So it is a big marketing day for all confectionery companies in Japan. Godiva captured this culture very well, and Godiva chocolate has become one of the famous brands for our Valentine's Day. They also made a lot of localized products for Japan, which become international hit products. For example, they needed to better product to sell more in summer because the sales went down for summer, which is very long in Japan. Not many Japanese people want to buy chocolate while it is hot, so they created a Godiva ice cream to increase the sales in the summer. This localized product was very successful even in other countries, such as China. Excuse me. The second successful case is Starbucks. They did a similar tactics as Godiva did. But I found the most interesting thing is that most of their international expansion was through joint venture with local companies. And they let the local companies approach them instead of approaching the companies. In addition, they have a very strict criteria for those local companies, which are financially solvency, knowledge of local market conditions, prior retail experiences, and creativity ability. Once they found the right partner, their agreement was based on the licensing and the loyalty. So the partner has more responsible for making it successful. Their joint partner in Japan is Sazabi, which had been operating a chain called Afternoon Tea, and had a visible presence in the important locations in Japan. Sazabi had 180 outlets at the moment. I was engaged in a variety of the product from lifestyle furniture and clothing to tea and confections. With this reliable local partner, Starbucks examined a Japanese market deeply and implemented a very detailed positioning strategy and developed a lot of the localized products. Starbucks priced their coffee $2.5 per cup, while the premium Japanese coffee chain charged $7 for coffee that are included in the price. The consumer was allowed to use its facility for 2 hours. The lower end charged $2 per coffee. They introduced some variation that appealed to local market, such as green tea frappuccino, which was not available in the United States at the moment, but became hugely popular globally later. They started to sell Hojicha Frappuccino last year, and I heard it was quite popular there. I believe they constantly create and develop a new flavor for local people to keep their attention. Japan was the second market that Starbucks entered after Canada. The JV for Japanese Starbucks proved so successful that it underwent an IPO in 2001. The only unit within the Starbucks International Network to be listed independently of the parent company. I don't have so much time to talk about these case studies in detail, but you can buy those case studies for $8 to $9 from the Harvard Business School case studies site if you're interested in. Next, I like to explain Japanese consumer trends and the behavior by generation. I referred to this book to get this analysis, and it might be interesting for you to read if you understand Japanese, or ask your Japanese associate, marketing person to read if you have. As I said, from this book, I would like to introduce Japanese customer segmentation by generation and then behaviors and groups. I want to talk about this because this will help you to capture Japanese customer trend and who might be your target. First, Japanese customer segmentation by generation. Sorry, it's pretty detailed, but I will explain step by step. So here's a breakdown of Japanese consumers' background, behavior, and the characteristic. The book is breaking down into 6 generations, but then I combined 4 generations to make it easy. And I intentionally keep Japanese generation terms, terminology, because the American generation breakdown is slightly different from Japanese ones. Also, it might be good for you to know the Japanese generation terminology to do your target analysis by the generation. Okay. So the more senior generation are called Dankai and post-Dankai generation, which includes people who were born from 1947 to 59. These generations account for a significant portion of our population. As you can imagine, their mindset is very traditional, especially for Dankai generation. However, they are considered as active seniors who are not the typical older Japanese people, like enjoying bonsai or just easy working. A lot of them love traveling to the world, trying new activity, even hardcore sports, such as triathlon or bicycling. A lot of women enjoying making up, fashion, and then very active to keep themselves fit and beautiful. The trigger for them to purchase the product is about health, and then they prefer convenient shopping. Smartphone use is very low, so their significant touch points are still mass media, such as TV, newspaper, radio, or magazines, some printed material. Next generation is bubble generation, who were born in 1960 to 1970. I believe the image of the Japanese to many Hawaii people is this figure, because they are the Japanese who actively invest and then coming to Hawaii when the Japanese economy was the most booming. Because they experienced a bubble economy in Japan, they are the first generation with many career women. Thus, many women in this generation have a strong desire to be recognized as successful. They also experienced post-bubble economy, which is called the last 20 years. Many people of this generation prefer high brand or luxury product to show their status. They love the exclusive product to feel exclusivity and they feel they are so special. And also they spend a lot of money on the gift to keep relationship with other people. So high brand premium is the key to attract this generation. I would say the touch point to them is still mass media, but many people are used to using digital media and smartphone. So maybe half and half. Next generation is Dankai Junior and then post-Dankai Junior. The kids generation of Dankai and the post-Dankai generation. These generations include the people who were born 1971 to 82. Those generations were born in the baby boom in Japan, so they survived a very high competition to get into university or get good job. Especially Dankai Junior, they are even called as unlucky generation. Because of their background, they desire to acquire advanced education and are invested in providing advanced education to their kids too. They are more individualistic than previous generations. So education and investing in themselves is a critical factor in this generation. They are very comfortable with using digital tools to find the best product. Word of mouth is very important for them to decide what they purchase. They check a lot of review sites such as kakaku.com, Akosme, for the travel, TripAdvisor, when they deciding the purchasing or deciding which service they want. Their generation, especially post-Dankai generation, was influenced by a lot of comics, anime, and play game, and they still enjoy them and spend money on it, such as paying subscription online game or other those entertainment activity. The youngest generation is called the Satori Digital generation, who was born in 83 to 1994. I think this generation is very close to American Gen Z or older millennials. They are the kid generation to bubble generation, so that they seen their parents have a hard time from company restructuring after they worked so hard in the bubble economy in Japan. Because of this background, they prioritize their personal life over their professional life, also prefer the friendship to competing with each other. Their relationship are broader and more global than any other generations because they have grown up with a digital environment such as social media. But meanwhile, they are tired of having an exposed life and are demanding personal space or looking for a place, time to enjoy the alone moment without connecting with people. So they don't care about the goods or products so much like American Millennium and the Generation G. They spend more time and money on experiences. Touchpoint, of course, is more social media with active, interactive communications more than mass media. Next one is Japanese customer segmentation by behavior and groups. This graph shows how consumer behavior is different depending on the customer's portfolio. If you go higher up on the vertical line, the customers are willing to pay premium prices on the product they like. The lower you go, they're more cost sensitive they are. On the horizontal line, the right group of customer is more selective than the left group of customer, which means that they are keener of selecting product, doing more research, and taking time to purchase the product. But the low preference customers prefer convenience shopping, such as subscription or membership shopping. According to this book, Japanese consumers are going towards more premium consumers or convenience consumers. Consumers tend to buy selected products that they value, such as clothes, bags, leisure, or other personal items at the premium price. For the daily consumption, such as grocery shopping, Japanese consumers prefer more convenient shopping, like subscription or online shopping. I believe most of your Japanese target market is the premium consumers, considering the price of your product when your products are imported in Japan. So targeting power couple who are relatively young but high net worth family, or rich seniors who wanted to pay premium price for the individual consumer, individual consumption might be a good strategy. Here, the brief description of updates, consumers' behavior by generation, and some categories in the Japanese market. This analysis is very important to find who is your target market for your product. So I recommend keep doing this and then keep in mind and update it all the time. Before I close my presentation, I would like to introduce LINE as one of the most efficient marketing platforms in Japan. LINE is the most popular message and social media app in Japan, which has about 88 million Japanese users. There are several reasons behind its success, including its unique animated sticker and other integrated services. Line for Business is one of the most functional platforms for business operators to enable themselves to promote their product and the service, advertise their campaign, get the customers' data, and other things. One of my favorite functions of Line for Business is that you can do a lot of survey and a lot of the customer willing to join to answer the survey if you give them incentives. Once you could acquire a good amount of subscriber, you can get a lot of data, your customers, analyze them, and they do have a good report system for that. With that data, you can do an efficient segmented marketing, which has a lot of better conversion rate than an email marketing too. Many Japanese companies, big to small business, spend a lot of money and resources on Line for Business to do the marketing more on Facebook or Instagram. I don't go into detail because I'm not like super expert about the Line for Business. Also, I'm not exactly sure there's a difference roles for the Japanese companies and the non-Japanese companies using Line for Business with each integrated service. Still, if you're looking for the good touch points for the Japanese customer, this is the best platform to reach out to different generations, including seniors in Japan. Also, you can start for free if you only send a limited amount of message to your subscriber. So this is the last slide on my presentation and a recommendation of where to start to target Japanese consumers. The most important thing is to start with research and preparation. Selling your product to Japanese tourists here and selling to Japanese customers in Japan are different businesses. Even if you're selling a good amount of a product to Japanese tourists here, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can sell them in the Japanese market. Analyze your product market fit in the Japanese market first. Can your products sell in Japanese market? Do you think your products are ready for the Japanese market? Do you think you can achieve your initial goal after entering the market?
Sorry, it looks like we lost Takaho. Hopefully she'll be able to come back shortly.
Hello, sorry.
Hi, Takaho.
Yeah, I came back.
Oh, good. Are you ready to start the Q&A, or are you still finishing your presentation? Okay.
No. That was the last presentation.
Great. So thank you so much, Takaho. And if anybody else has questions, please continue to send them in. So our first question is, Mike asks, how should a Hawaii business approach the question of analyzing the competition? Are there marketing consultants that we can turn to?
Yeah, I think you can do both ways. There's a lot of small marketing companies doing very good job and they speak English in the Japanese market. So if you want to look for the partners, like you can just Google and then maybe try to contact with them and then listen to their case studies and other experiences. And also you can easily do competitive analysis, like, just Google what's your product. Like if you're selling chocolate, just Google like a chocolate in Japan. And then you can like maybe you can start finding a big major player first, and maybe you can go to more detail, small medium-sized competitors. Also, maybe you go to Rakuten site and then put in a chocolate on the Japanese, and then you can see a lot of product and with the customer review.
Great. Maui Preserved asked, is there an English translation of the book you were talking about?
I don't think so. Yeah, well, that's the one of the reason Japan is very difficult market. A lot of English book is translated to Japanese, but then there's none of Japanese book to translate to English. So I highly recommend to find somebody to do that.
Okay. And then Core Adorables had a few questions. They say they're a Hawaii resort wear brand and we sell to Hankyu department stores and on Rakuten Japan. What generation shops on Japan's QVC?
For the Hankyu and Rakuten, you mean? For the
I think she's saying she's already located at Hankyu and uses Rakuten, but she's wondering more about QVC in Japan, what the demographic for that is.
Is an easy shopping. I think they have a channel in Japanese TV, but I think the most of their target is like maybe the seniors around late 40 to maybe like early 60 Japanese women. Even like Rakuten, I know a lot of senior people, women, especially for women, they prefer Rakuten than Amazon. And also Hankyu department store, definitely their target is senior women. I don't think there's a lot of Japanese young customers over there.
Okay. And she's asking also, where do you suggest they find or hire Japanese social media influencers?
It's very difficult question, a good question. So Japanese, it's all about the network. So they don't like the new person just text us. So like maybe you should find a Japanese people here or in Japan marketing company that they know those industry or the social. They have a lot of agency who has a lot of Instagram influencer in their company. So if I were you, I'd rather go to that kind of agency than a marketing company and ask them how much is this, rather than I have to go and find influencer by myself.
Oh, I see. And her last question is, how do we add line to our website on Shopify?
Sorry, I mean, I'm not sure how you can actually integrate it to Shopify with Line, but I know they have a Line market where you can actually put the product and you can go to, you can kind of integrate it, your sales platform to the Line. Also, it's easy by even the messaging, you can just easily copy the link from Shopify to there and then make some better looking for the image and stuff. So integrating to other platform is pretty easy for Line.
Okay, great. And probably for their Shopify website, they should contact their web developer.
Yeah. And there's a lot of live marketing company too.
Okay.
Google like live marketing, there's a lot of live marketing. And then I think most of Japanese people, marketing company exist in Japan, not Hawaii maybe, but in Japan, they should have the basic knowledge of the marketing, live marketing.
Okay, great. And Peter is asking, what's the best way to taste test our product to see if it is a suitable taste in Japan?
That's very difficult. So one of the way is maybe you should do the focus group to person who live in Japan, but don't ask the Japanese people who live here a long time. Maybe somebody like students, exchange students from UH, they have a pretty more Japanese taste than people who live in here a long time. So you should do a focus group. I know a lot of marketing companies do the focus group in Japan, but also, you know, Hankyu store, that would be the very good for you to kind of test your product and how they think. So if I have the store and I have the opportunity to put the store in Hankyu, what I'm going to do is rather than trying to sell or find a vendor up there, I rather they kind of like find a client or customer, give them incentive and try your taste and then answer your survey. I think that might be the very best way for you to test your product.
Yeah, so maybe going with, you know, Debet or HDOA to one of their trade shows in Japan. I know they do one for Hankyu as well.
Yeah.
Great. What do you think is the most important to Japanese consumers with regards to foreign products? I know we talked about, you know, a few different things, but what would you say is number one important?
It really depends on the product. I can't say that this is the most important, but I think when I'm comparing the Japanese product and then a Hawaii product, I think most of the time I found the Hawaii product is not necessarily a good package. Like it's like Japanese people really love the fancy package, especially they prefer, they tend to spend more money on the gift rather than their daily consumption. So they don't care the daily consumption, but the package, which is so cheap. But if you pay like, okay, I'm gonna pay $30 for a cookie, most of the time it's a gift for their company or clients, right? So they really have to be very good package and look very good. I mean, I usually when I have some clients ask me, like, especially for those premium products, I told them spend the money 90% on package and 10% on product.
That's very interesting. What would you say is one common mistake a lot of the first-time exporters to Japan make?
And for the Hawaii company?
Yes.
I think, as I said many times in Japan, like because they're selling a good amount to Japanese tourists, they're like, oh, Japanese people love our product. And that's not true because they have a different mind to buy your product in Hawaii. And once the product is available in Japanese market, their expectations, like their criteria got super high to evaluate product. So that's kind of common mistake that like, oh, like, you know, that's kind of Japanese expectation, difference gap over the Japanese expectation.
And I know you kind of mentioned that there are a lot of regulations in Japan. So where would someone go to look up the different regulations for their product?
It really depends on product. I know the clothes or something to wear. It's not the match regulation. So I can easily kind of find the way to logistic to import. But for food, maybe like JETRO might be the good method because they have an English material for the regulation for importing. I think the food and cosmetic is like the same level of regulation. The alcohol is like way higher. So I mean, yeah. So maybe you should start Googling and then looking for the English materials. But then if you have a Japanese associate, I highly recommend her to Google for in Japanese because they have more resources.
Right. And I know we talked about how kind of Line is the dominant social media in Japan, but we've had a question about Instagram and if a company should create a dedicated Instagram account for their Japanese consumers and like have two separate accounts or just run one account.
It really depends if you need a very detailed explanation for your product. For example, I think fashion, I mean, Japanese people can read English, but they can't speak. So if it's just fashion, like something easy to know or the picture is more important for you, maybe you don't have to. Maybe hashtag the Japanese like language for the hashtag. But if you have like something that you really needed to tell detail, like tech or something, maybe you should have a Japanese account for them to understand.
Right. How would I know that my products would be a good fit with Japanese consumers?
Like research, like I like the Harvard Business case study because they have a really good case studies, but they have a very limited Japanese marketing one, but they have a few. And then, as I said, like do competitive analysis. Like usually, if you Google the word in Rakuten, Amazon, or any sites, it's like top ranking of like a chocolate or something like that. They have a lot of like resources, and those Japanese is not difficult. So you can use like Google Translator, like integrated one to see what's gonna brief description of this. So you see your product and compare it to the product selling a lot in Japan. That might be the first stop to look for the Japanese market.
Right. And maybe one last question. So what are some other, is that another question? Oh, no. What are some other good resources for me to learn about the Japanese market?
Great question and very difficult. As I said, when I did the research, I mean, I have those old knowledges, but in order to do this webinar, I still have to do like extra research. And then I can do it because I'm a Japanese. And I subscribe in Nikkei newspaper a lot. I know there is a Nikkei newspaper in English, and then still the resources are limited compared to Japanese Nikkei newspaper. But then I think you should follow the media, like a Japanese media who is talking about what's going on in Japan. Because I feel like sometimes when I talk to the Hawaii company here, they didn't even update the Japanese consumers' behavior or trend for like 10 years.
Oh.
Yeah. So
wow.
Like at least like surface information. Try to capture what's going on from the Japanese media in English.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Takaho. So before we wrap up this webinar, a quick reminder for the audience. The webinar has been recorded and will be shared via email to those who registered, and we'll also be sending you a copy of the slides. The next webinar in our e-commerce and digital marketing series will again feature Takaho as a speaker and will be about e-commerce and consumer trends in Japan, and will be held on Tuesday, July 20th at 11 a.m. We will put the link in the chat to RSVP. Takaho will be providing 1 hour of consulting services to the first 3 manufacturers that RSVP to the session, along with an additional half-hour consulting services for manufacturers on a limited basis. If you are a manufacturer interested in consulting services with Takaho, please email me at nicole@htdc.org. Thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in services from Innovate Hawaii, including e-commerce, workforce, food safety, lean, and more, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.